Good morning. I'm going to get started since we are on a little bit of a tight schedule this morning. Welcome all to the first ever Princeton Public Library Zine Fest, or as we're affectionately calling it, Piton Zine Fest. My name is Laura Bishop. I'm the head of adult services here, and it is my true pleasure to introduce this panel on zine culture and collections. We have three wonderful panelists to share with you their work and experience with zines. And I'm going to introduce you to our first presenter. After each of our presenters speaks, we will have time for Q&A at the end. So Mike Lupa is a former zine editor who was deeply involved in New York City's indie press since the 1990s. Initially published with Supplies Liberated from Kinko's copies, Green Means Go fanzine eventually enjoyed a run of 3,000 professionally printed copies per issue with multi-city distribution. He is the advisor for Princeton Community Radio Station, WPRB, and hosts a weekly free-form program on Jersey City's WFMU. Please join me in welcoming Mike Lupa.
Excellent. Okay, so not to put you on the spot or correct you in public, but my name is Mike Lupica. It's quite all right, happens all the time. And I want to start this morning by saying that my remarks today are not particularly unique. My story is just one of many that might help illuminate the way that the zine ecosystem worked when I was involved with it. I'm a former zine editor who got started in self-publishing in the late 80s after I found my way to the independent music scene that was anchored by the old City Gardens nightclub in Trenton. I started going there as a teenager, and one of the things that I figured out pretty quickly by seeing the Ramones and Iggy Pop and the Circle Jerks was that there would be these other people at these shows selling zines, which is to say that they were selling these amateurish photocopied booklets that were all about this freaky music that I was on the verge of discovering. And one of the first zines that I picked up was done by a guy from Trenton, by a guy from Trenton who was named Bob Conrad, and his zine was rather heroically called "This Zine Sucks." Bob wrote about the kind of bands that played at City Gardens, and he also reviewed other zines from around the area. And I knew that I wanted to do or get involved in this world about 10 seconds after reading my first issue of This Zine Sucks, because it was a portal to an exciting subculture, but also because his zine doubled as an instruction manual. Zines could be made by anyone with easily accessed tools. All you needed was paper and scissors and some tape and some loose change for the photocopier. As a young person, that immediacy had a huge impact on me, which I've carried over to my professional life in community radio. The immediacy for me was the message. And the expectation of the zine world was that even if you've made it this far, if you even know what a zine is, you're part of this and you should be making something yourself. And as I later learned, that idea kind of underpinned the entire do-it-yourself ethic. It's easy, it's cheap, do it. And for me, the zine that really drove that idea home was called Fact Sheet 5. Fact Sheet 5 was completely dedicated to reviewing other fanzines. It was a zine about zines. And it was the first one to illuminate the sheer scale of the independent press world for me. And mercilessly, it also revealed that not every zine had to be about hardcore bands. There were poetry zines, and there were political zines, and zines about feminism, and pets, and sex, and cult movies, and food. One of the most arcane zines that I first came across through Fact Sheet 5 was called Biscuits and Gravy Quarterly, which was just done by this guy who was super into eating biscuits and gravy, and he wrote about it 4 times a year. Pardon me. So Fact Sheet 5 illuminated an exciting and an esoteric alternate reality that seemed to be everywhere, but which had evaded all detection up until that point for me. So this revelation was like a bomb going off in my teenage brain. So a friend and I, who was a local sort of juvenile delinquent and an aspiring acid casualty, he lived right around the corner from here actually, he liked the same music that I did. So we spent the entire summer of 1989 camped out in his attic, pasting up the first issue of our zine, which we ultimately ended up printing 1 copy of at Kinko's, because getting 2 teenage boys to agree on anything is a losing proposition. So our publishing marriage ended in the fall, and we both went to work on our own individual zines. A reporter from the Trentonian actually interviewed us for a short article about zines, which we both cranked out pretty religiously for the first few years after high school. We would often change the name and the format of our zine with every issue, which is not a great marketing strategy. But again, teenage boys, no idea what we're doing. When I turned 20, I got involved with WPRB, which is the Princeton University student-run community radio station. And while there, I started what wound up being a long-term relationship with someone whom I eventually moved to Jersey City with, and who was similarly obsessed with underground music. We wanted to start a new zine together, and being in the city animated this idea because of all the other zines that we were now suddenly exposed to. One of the big ones was called World War III Illustrated, which was an anarchist zine, which was very heavily steeped in revolutionary politics and things like squatters' rights and institutional racism. And my girlfriend and I were in our early 20s, and we were pretty naive about a lot of this stuff. So World War III Illustrated was very eye-opening, and it inspired us to take our work more seriously, even if we were still just writing about underground music. So for our part, Jen Moyes and I started a zine called Green Means Go in 1994, and we published our first issue that winter by sneaking into her office in Manhattan on Sunday morning, where there was a giant, like, Buick-sized copy machine. She was a copy editor at Harper's Bazaar magazine. And even though this was 30 years ago, I feel as though I should now thank the late Liz Talberis, who was the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar at the time, friend of Princess Diana, publishing icon, for allowing our zine to get off the ground as an illegal and unsanctioned subsidiary of Hearst Publications. It was not printed on their dime without their knowledge. For distribution, our top priority was to get our zine into a place called See Here, which was the world's first, and as far as I know, only shop dedicated to zines. Let's see if this plays here. There we go. This is just a short video clip. As you can see from this video, See Here was a small, very grungy basement store on East 7th Street in Lower Manhattan. It smelled like mildew, pee, marijuana, and old books. And it became a regular part of our weekend rounds that we would hit every Saturday to drop off copies of our zine. So yes, our first foray into distribution was leaving piles of zines on that dirty floor every weekend. And we considered it a major life achievement when they let us take them off the floor and put them on the shelf. I think we were like 22, and I think we bought a bottle of wine to celebrate. Like, that was like a major life achievement. So we would also sneak into the student centers at SVA and the Parsons School of Design and NYU to leave copies there. So just these sort of like harmless guerrilla tactics to get our work in front of other young people. In the mid-90s, the East Village was still pretty bohemian and populated by a lot of artists and musicians. So the stores in that neighborhood reflected the demographics and combined to form what a friend of mine once brilliantly called a dense network of unique libraries. If you wanted zines, you went to See Here and St. Mark's Books. If you wanted underground movies or foreign films, you went to Kim's Video. And for underground music, there were like half a dozen different record stores in the area. And the fact that every facet of this culture had a physical rallying point, that really contributed to the sense of scale that I keep talking about. These dedicated media spaces were all reliably frequented by other people who were into the same stuff that we liked. So it was a great place to connect with other people who felt like fellow travelers. So Jen and I cranked out 4 issues of Green Means Go using the Harper's Bazaar copy machine. But as the zine grew in readership and started getting decent reviews, we felt emboldened enough to graduate to newsprint. And by that time, we were getting mail from all over the world, and we'd become a kind of known entity in the music ecosystem. But it was always our goal for the zine to be free, and so we just sold enough ads to cover the cost of printing. That was it. We get 3,000 copies printed. Most of the boxes would be shipped back to us in Jersey City, but we would also have boxes shipped to friends in Austin, San Francisco, LA. We had a box sent to London, and then our friends there would leave them around at all of the independent venues in those places. So at the end, Green Means Go was a professionally printed 75-page zine with distribution in a bunch of big cities, which I still think was pretty good for 2 people in their early 20s who had no idea what they were doing and no previous experience with this. Our success was 100% enabled by the things that we learned from fellow zine makers, all of whom were very willing to help and share their strategies with us, which I'm delighted to learn still seems to be the case today. We made all of our mistakes in front of an audience, but we had blessed to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Q&A at the very end?
At
or-
the end,
Very end,
yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, let me just prepare our next presentation. Okay, while I'm figuring myself out here, I want to take a moment to introduce our next speaker. Laura Pohl created zines in the 1980s and 90s and is now the default zine librarian at the Princeton Public Library. There, she has gathered both an archival collection of zines and set up a circulating zine library. In her spare time, her real job is being the archivist of the Trentonia Local History Department, where she oversees nearly 300 years of Trenton City history. So please join me in welcoming Laura Pohl.
So, as Laura said, I am going to talk about the archival and circulating zine collections at the Trent Free Public Library, where I am the archivist and the Trentonian Local History Department. And this is a very archivist quote. Library is an access point to material that provides an accurate picture of a culture and a time period. What a society writes, publishes, and reads is a guide to its culture, and the holdings of a library are essentially a record of that culture. So when those holdings are incomplete, an incomplete narrative is left behind, and it's very vital that all voices are allowed to speak. So several years ago, I had created, oops, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. There we go. Several years ago, I created an archival, non-circulating collection of Trenton zines, including This Zine Sucks, one of them. But I wasn't necessarily seeing them as zines. I was seeing them as pieces of a historical record of what was happening in Trenton during that moment in time, and mostly centered around a music club called City Gardens. So Malcontent right there, that's a zine that I had done. That's the second issue. That was about 1985. So shameless plug. Eventually the collection expanded to include a broader New Jersey topics and zines made by New Jersey people, turning into what we now call the Zines collection, because we're very clever coming up with little names like that. In the meantime, at the library, there was another librarian who was talking to me about creating a circulating zine library. And this was as part of the second part of a social justice corner that she was working on. Unfortunately, she left for another job, and this was before she was able to do the zine library part. But that idea that she had really stuck in my brain. And I had stopped doing zines in the mid-90s, and I really hadn't thought much about them, if at all, since that time. And I was thinking, were zines still a thing? So I started Googling, and I was very surprised that yes, oh my God, they very much were still a thing. And they were showing up in libraries. They were mostly academic libraries, and they were mostly as part of someone's papers, but they were still out there, and they were being accessed in a wider scope than ever before. And I even found some of my old zines at the University of California, Riverside, and in the Fact Sheet 5 archive. So that was really cool. So based on my archivist idea of community representation, I presented the concept to administration why zines belonged in our public library. It was approved with a small budget, so I started buying through Etsy and through distros. The topics that I had focused on were mental health, urban gardening, bicycle and skateboard culture, which is very, very popular in Trenton, personal views, attitudes, anything that I thought the community would be interested in. And I had also got a lot that I felt would inspire other people to create zines, to see that, oh, you know, I can make one too, so let's do it. I bought some books such as The Stolen Sharpie Revolution and What You Mean, What's a Zine, to talk about what zines were, people didn't know. And I also got compilations of zines like Comic Bus and Shotgun Seamstress, anything that would spark some people's interest. And I also really wanted to get zines that were created by people of color. That was another important factor. Am I going the right way? Okay. Then I had to find a place where these zines were going to reside. And our library is relatively small, has a very limited layout, but right outside my department at the bottom of the main staircase is a seating area called the Poetry Cafe. And there are 4 freestanding baker's racks. There's 2 of them there. They're really more decorative than they are functional. And I felt that there was some potential if I did some creative consolidation. And as you can see, I was able to claim one of the units. And this is right outside my department, Trentoniana on the right, and on the left was the local authors collection, which was a little bonus to this project. We were able to create that as well. Zines, as you know, are a challenge to display because they're all different sizes and they flop over on the shelves because they don't have spines that keep them upright. So I raided basement storage and I found a bunch of old magazine boxes. I scrubbed them up and put some stickers on them. And to help with uniformity, not to be confused with conformity, I ordered comic book bags and boards, all the same size, you can see. And I felt that it was really important that the circulating zines be cataloged into the main database because I wanted them to be seen as equal alongside standard library material. And most people will browse. A lot of people have not checked them out because they're small. You know, you can sit down and you can read them in the Poetry Cafe. So it's more of a browsing collection. But if you want to take them home, you still can check them out. And as someone who created zines once upon a time, I was very much aware of the concept of zines in libraries, the problems in terms of privacy. And I created a Google form asking for permission from any creators that I had purchased from, so they knew that they were going to be in a public library. And I also asked them how they would like their zines to be represented in the catalog. So I asked their name that they wanted to be represented by, any keywords that they felt that their zine should be represented by. And I really, really wanted to keep being the default zine librarian. So I needed to find a way to maneuver that into part of my archivist job description. So enter the Trenton Free Public Zine. And they're all right here. I have 21 topics. And they are a zine about Trenton history in mini-zine form. We decided that this is how we were going to connect local history and zines. And we made up some displays and put them around town, and they've become pretty popular. And it's gotten the community interested in Trenton history. It's not an overwhelming dry history. It's just enough to get people started. Like, oh, did that happen in Trenton? That's pretty cool. And I'm going to end with this quote. Libraries can be and should be controversial, inspiring, and infuriating. And I think that's also a really good definition of zines. So zines definitely belong in public library, and we definitely want to share yours. So if you have any, contact me. We also made a little zine about zines. So that was really cool.
Our next speaker, Megan Lotz, is the art librarian at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, where she embraces creativity and play when teaching, building collections, engaging with colleagues, and facilitating programming and events across New Brunswick campuses. In 2021, the American Libraries Association published her first book, Advancing a Culture of Creativity in Libraries, Programming and Engagement. And her second book, The Playful Library, Building Environments for Learning and Creativity, is forthcoming in June. Watts earned an MFA and MLIS from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and continues to explore and create site-specific art, installations, and happenings. Please join me in welcoming Megan Lotz.
Thank you. I've got a really really booming voice, so if it gets over the top loud, please certainly let me know, and apologize. I realized behind you I'm like lifting my skirt and putting my thing. I told myself midway I have tights on, so no show here today, but hopefully the zines. So thank you so much for the introduction. It was so kind. So first of all, it's wonderful to be here, and really what an exciting day of events and to celebrate the world of zines. And before I get started, I want to send a shout out to all the hardworking individuals. It takes a village to put on an event and a whole team of this. So I'd like to give a round of applause to our individuals today. So thank you so much. It really is take important individuals and librarians and people to bring us together to be able to have these important conversations and to engage in civic discourse. So, as noted, my name is Megan Locks, and I'm here to talk about zines, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my work as an art librarian and then a little bit about an artist and how I engage with zines. As faculty at the Rutgers University Libraries, I do have to warn you, I have got a really cool job. I work in one of 2 dedicated art libraries in the state of New Jersey. Obviously, Mark Bond here in Princeton is the other, which isn't quite open, so I guess we're the only art library right now in New Jersey, or that's what I tell my administrators when I'm looking for money and other needs. There at Rutgers, I embrace play and creativity when I'm teaching, building collections, facilitating programs and events across the New Brunswick campuses. I'm known as an individual who uses active learning and reflective assessment in my work, and zines have really proven to be one of my most impactful projects. As you'll see on this slide, zines can be used as a teaching tool to learn about library, and they're here, look, I've already flipped on. Learn about libraries, empower patron voices, encourage creativity in making, discuss multimodal literacies, but also at the Rutgers Art Libraries, zines have gotten new users into the libraries. And really what it's done for us is this opportunity to empower our users, to empower our underrepresented communities. And then they also have an opportunity to add their zines that are made by our students, faculty, and staff to our teaching collection in the art library or to Rutgers Special Collections and University Archives Popular Culture Collection if they so choose. Zines can be used for us as a form of outreach and publicity. On this slide, you'll see a copy of the Rutgers Art Library Info Zine, which the best part about this, we had a typo error on it for about 2 years, and someone was like, oh, I thought it was just clever, and it was like, oh yeah, it was. It was really a typo. But you know, in the world of zines, it worked. It felt appropriate. But as you can guess, and this is our version in 2024, but it started in 2018, so it's gone through a lot of different iterations. But really what I wanted, the libraries at Rutgers, and I think a lot of libraries, make these really expensive brochures that aren't that attractive, and the students look at them and they think, oh shucks, I left this here on the table after that engagement or coming to the library. But when I handed them this zine, they opened it, they looked at it, they asked questions. They wanted more to give to their friends, and suddenly the great word of the art library was traveling all over Rutgers. And really, they've become an inspiration. Particularly, I work with students in the arts, so they're curious, what have I done, and how could they do it themselves? We also do a lot of teaching engagement in the Rutgers Art Library, and we use zines as a creative, playful means to teach visual literacy, finding images, scholarly research, and more. In one example, I worked with 8 sections of an English course, and if you've been to college and taken an English course, you may have written, raise your hands, an annotated bibliography. Oh, of course, one of our most favorite loved projects ever, right? I can't think of something more to put me to sleep. So what we decided to do was, instead of giving that annotated bibliography to your family at the holidays, let's turn it into a zine. Let's make it something practical. Let's figure out a way to actually use our skills. And it's the same thing. You're learning how to cite, you're learning how to find images. So we've done this now with probably 300 or 400 students on campus, and I'm just going to give you a response to when I asked them, what did you learn making a zine? What did you learn looking at the zine collection? And this is what they have to say. They were interested in the wide range of zines and how these can be made and what they look like. One of my favorites, someone said, I didn't know about long arm staplers. They're great for binding zines. I'm old school, I'm a baby of the 70s. No one knows about a typewriter. You really want to blow their minds. Zines are a cheap way to tell their stories. One student noted that feminists and women from the punk culture helped popularize zines. Another student noted zines can be anything you want them to be. Another student noted, I learned how to make and fold zines. And here you'll see some just basic, simple zines sitting on the table, the students gathering, eating, snacking. And anybody that's been to an event at the art library, you would know that this is a crowd because we're in a really difficult location and we're really hard to get to, and there's no parking. So this will give you an example of what our exhibits look like. In the art library, we've done 70 exhibits for little to no cost, except the cost of time and money, or I'm sorry, time and labor. So you can see this is a great example. This exhibit has been up now for 1.5 years because everybody's loved it so much. They want to learn. But what I want to say is that these are really incredible documents in archives of ideas and thoughts from our freshmen. Nobody is underrepresented on a community than your freshman, your sophomore, your junior, your senior. They just don't exist. But in this case, there's something about when they can bring their parent to the library to see this incredible object in Zine, their ideas. It really, really opens their minds to what's possible. But again, we also get to show them, hey, this is what a photocopier is. We used to like hide into these places in the middle of the night, and I heard like the Riot Girls telling a great story. They were working in DC, got stuck somewhere in somebody's office in a snowstorm, and like created 500 zines printing because, boy, well, they were there, why not, right? But of course, I always bring up Kinkos to my students, and they're like, kink what? You know, so also shows a little bit of our age, I have to say. To give you another idea of kind of what I do with these, and I've brought these if you'd like one today, I'm happy to share. This is my business card. And you'll see when I give this to the art students, they're like, what have you done here? But basically, I travel all over the world, and I'm really lucky in that aspect of my job. And I decided that, oh my gosh, I come home with 10 or 12 cards, and I'm like, who are these people? Because I don't stop to write a bit of information, which is foolish. So I started creating these and decided, it kind of started a whole movement on campus of, well, what else can we do? And for me, really, this is a blend of my life as an artist and my life as a maker and my life as a librarian. So again, make yourself a business card. People love these. They think you've given them a gift, and they leave excited because you have. They just don't know you've given them a gift about yourself. All right, and then today, one of the projects I'm really excited about, this is my latest artist project. I'm really lucky as an art librarian to get to continue to look at art. I do a lot of lowbrow materials and trying to elevate them to that higher level. Later today, you'll see the little zine vending machine, which will be downstairs in the market. And basically for $4, you can buy one of 6 zines. It's a surprise of what you get. But really, this is just an idea of making zines affordable, putting them out there. This can go anywhere. It's a vending machine. It's pretty sturdy. I can even lift it. Granted, I'm a big girl, so you know I've got a lot of strength. But they can go all over, and it's kind of that fun idea of takes us back to a time when you actually had to have 4 quarters on you. Quarters were a real hot commodity in college. I still feel a real connection to them, like, oh, I've got a fistful of quarters. This would mean something when I was in my 20s, you know, this would have been dinner. So, again, I need to buy dinner tonight, so, no, I'm kidding. But I want us to think about, again, these affordable, interesting, engaging ways. People go nuts when they see this silly little machine. So again, as I noted, I'm an academic, so it would be completely out of character if I didn't tell you about my book, my website, where to find more. We have an incredible amount of information of making zines at the art library at Rutgers. We don't have a collection yet, but as I was talking with Laura earlier, it's something we'd like to think about, and maybe at one point, but really what we're into the business of making and sharing, and we'll be offloading all sorts of awesome stuff to those collections. So certainly if you'd like to know more, in my first book, you'll find a whole chapter dedicated to zines, and in my forthcoming book here shortly, more about zines. I'd like to thank you all for your attention. Again, another round of applause for the folks that created today, made it happen. If you have any questions, I'd love to talk. Contact me anytime, and I'll be here the rest of the day. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. All right, if you want to, we'll have our panelists come up to the front and have a seat. So I'm going to start with you, Mike. In your experience as someone with deep ties to the zine culture of the 80s and 90s, how did your experience within this culture reflect your experience as a young person? And how did people of your generation influence and shape zine culture?
Well, I'm a Gen Xer, so we're very tiny and we don't have a lot of contributions to our name. We're kind of like, you know, Nirvana, hip hop, bye. You know, that was it. So it's difficult to say, and I don't really like, you know, trying to speak as the voice of a particular generation, but I would just say it was a very, very useful outlet for me as somebody who was really not living up to his potential. I was a classic underachiever, and I was in about the worst environment as a teenager for a creative kid with some kind of curiosity about himself, which is I was in Catholic high school, a really bad one. So it was very refreshing. As I said, I don't know how well this is actually tracking to the question you asked, but it really kind of like pointed me out of the doldrums and misery of being a teenager towards a future that actually seemed exciting and which actually seemed like I could have a real stake in. And I think, or I would hope anyway, that other people have kind of had a similar experience.
Moving on to now, in recent years, I think it's safe to say there's really been a surge in interest in zines and zine creation. So in your opinion, why do you think this is? Is there something about our particular cultural moment that's driving this surge?
It's funny because I get asked that question a lot related to my work in radio, and people always say, like, what is it that you think keeps young people interested in this antiquated medium? And I think a lazy answer is just because people think it's like weird and retro. But I actually think it has much more to do with the fact that there is an unparalleled satisfaction to making something with your hands that you can actually hold, that you can touch, and especially for the last getting on 20 years now, all cultural experience, everything has been crammed into through the same lens. This is what you get your news from. This is how you talk to your friends. This is where you look at art. This is where you listen to music. This is where people, experience, sex. Everything is coming through the same screen, and it taps a totally different part of your brain, I think, to actually make something. I wrote for a blog in the early 2000s, which was a pretty popular blog in the New York City area, and that was exciting, and my work as a zine editor definitely carried over to the kind of writing I did and the style of writing I did. But the satisfaction of having like a blog post get really popular was nothing compared to like looking out the window, waiting for the UPS guy to like stop in front of your apartment, knowing that they were going to be dropping off all these boxes of this thing you made. So I think the satisfaction of just making something that occupies neat space is a big part of it. I think because it's so unusual. There's nothing like that anymore.
Yeah. Very true. Laura, in an increasingly digital age, I think this is a good segue.
What he said.
The role of print zines. Yeah. So you're.
Yeah, I think that print zines are even more important now than they were then. It's kind of like you have this connection with the creator. Like I am going to hold this zine in my physical space, and now you are going to hold this zine in your physical space. And you experience it in all your senses. And you don't really get that in digital. Digital is great for just getting content. But I think zines, just the nature of them is to interact with them and smell them and touch them. And some of the zine makers, they put stickers on or they hand color. And so you're experiencing something physical that somebody else has sent you. And plus, it's really cool getting mail.
Yeah, I miss it. Laura, how does the library archival institution where you work decide which zines to include in its collection? Are there specific criteria or guidelines for selecting zines for your collection?
Yeah, I had created a collection policy when I was first bringing this concept to administration. And I focused on things that we would collect as opposed to what we wouldn't collect. And I wanted to get stuff that would be helpful to the community and what they would be interested in to get them to create their own zines. So it really follows the overall collecting policy for books. Of course, when things come in and it's kind of questionable, I get a second opinion. The person who is doing the minimal cataloging for the zines, she got offended every now and then by titles. It wasn't necessarily a content of a zine, it was a title. And one that she went to the director about was called Liquid Anus. And it was a comic. It was nothing offensive, pornographic, violent. It was just a dopey name that the creators had come up with. So you have to take that into respect as well.
Thank you. Megan, we're gonna move on to you. How has using zines as a teaching tool with college students enhanced your ability to teach particular skills? Is there something about this medium of instruction that makes them more effective than other mediums?
Good question. Anybody been to a bibliographic session or a library teaching session before? Had that pleasure of 50 minutes of pray to God you brought a phone because you need something to do. Honestly, a lot of it is incredibly boring. I watch students just like, but I know it's boring because I'm also 10 minutes in like, whew, are we there yet? And there's still 40 minutes to go. So I think that one of the things that we have to remember is, first of all, students are bored to tears on a daily basis. I teach a freshman class of 20 and we're learning about play and they're just like, one of them tells me one day, I got an A in the course and I only went to class once. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm offended, I'm hurt, but I'm like, tell me everything. Because I was like, how did you do this? And this idea of memorization and regurgitation is silly. This gets us nowhere. But also the students aren't learning anything. And when you give them back to this idea of this DIY, this tactical, we were meant to work with our hands. That's what really we care about. We want to tell our story. And this is an opportunity for people to tell a story on just a simple little piece of paper. All you need is paper. All you need is a pen. And honestly, the students come alive because when you show them a collection of 150 liquid anus, okay, yes, it would offend my mother, but she'd act like it wouldn't. But the students would be like, she's getting street cred for liquid anus. You know, so it's all about your audience, so to speak. And I think that that's the thing that's important is that I'm really giving information and things that are speaking to students. And this is a really wild idea because you know what? It's hard being a student. And if you want to go to grad school, you want to get that grant, you want to get that artist money, you better have some creativity, you better have a zine because you're going to need to be better than someone else. And this really gives a practical idea and way to think about scholarly research. And it's stinking fun. I've never heard somebody say, oh, I don't know, that zine workshop really sucked. No one says that, right? They have said that to the 50-minute snooze fest that a librarian gives on like, here's how to use the EBSCO database. Woo! Have you heard of Google? I mean, come on. So I think that this really gives a librarian and those of us that are really teaching information literacy and getting people to engage with knowledge, you learn a lot when you make something like this. From your hands, from your ideas, and how to cite something, how to think about other zines, looking at other primary resources. And that's cool. People care about primary resource because I agree. Who cares about this phone, right? Everybody has one. There's nothing unique about that.
And in terms of creating digital versions of your zines, if you do that, how does that experience differ from the print?
So that's a really great question. This is something that I get criticized a lot about. Oh, Megan, you're using a computer to do zines. Like, oh, that's so anti-zine. Well, you know what? So's, I would say, using electric tools when I learned to be a stone carver. And I wouldn't do that back then. But you know what? I'm a baby of the 70s. We didn't have computers when I went to college. I got a typewriter, and not a real nice one. So the idea that now, when I heard Riot Girls talking about their zines, they were like, oh my God, if we'd have had computers, we'd have changed the world. Had they had the internet. So it's about shifting in time and what's available and using our resources. So I use a little program you all know called PowerPoint. We have templates set up and we give these to the students and then they go bonkers. But for me personally, honestly, what normally happens, because I am trained as a painter and a maker, I make it by hand first. And then I translate it over to digital. But you'll see in a lot of my work and a lot of my zines, I use my own creativity and my own drawing and the artist skills that, I paid $160,000 to go to school for. They were called artists. Some people are called doctors, but And I think that this is really interesting and powerful. So I encourage everyone, get these in the hands of people and get their ideas. I was an only child. I was making zines at the tender age of like 4 or 5. I just didn't know it.
We do have some time for audience questions if anyone has a question for one of our panelists today.
Megan, I have a question for you. There's a book arts festival that's held at Rutgers that I've been to, and it's really fun, but it's definitely more sort of the artists here and then we're here, other than a workshop. And I'm just wondering if you've worked with that event at all, or if you see any possibilities to collaborate?
So I think that's a great question. I would like to say yes. They have a new director. A lot of people are transferring over, and we really have a new popular culture collection. So I absolutely agree, because I think that one of the things that we host Peter and Donna Thomas, which are kind of the founders of Artist Books, and they said to me once over dinner, they show up at your house, give a lecture, and then sleep outside of your house in their tiny little home on wheels, which is magic, because the whole neighborhood is like, who are these people? And he was like, this is an artist book, and this is like this is a zine. And he's like, you have to think about where it is on the spectrum. So I think it's really interesting, because you're right. They don't always want the likes of my shenanigans with this piece of paper and my creativity, playful ideas, because these are high-level artist books. I think that's a bunch of bologna sandwiches, if you want my personal opinion. This is just as important, and quite frankly, this is more accessible, because no one's letting you get your grubby little mugs on those fancy artist books, except for the day you maybe attend that symposium. So I think we have to really rethink this canon of, aren't we being a little bit of gatekeepers? Or maybe we even being a little bit of like, oh, sorry, this is only for the privileged. Because I'm here to tell you, it's not a very diverse crowd that goes to that organization, or to that particular event. So I want us to rethink that.
Yeah.
This would bring everyone.
Yeah, because I think all these things need to be, instead of getting a template and doing things the same way. I mean, I noticed that with a lot of organizations, something works, and then they just do it over and over and over again. And I just think it would add some life to that event.
I'm glad you've brought it up. You've just instantly, I'm like, ding. Lesson number 3 learned today. I've already learned 2 things today, so that's the number 3rd. But I think that's a really good idea, because wouldn't it be powerful to say, hey, come make an artist book. This is what this is.
Right.
And then give it to Laura, who's going to be there that day and talk about the Trentonia collection. And maybe Mike comes as well and talks about this maker. And I think here we suddenly have this historical look of how this is happening in Jersey, and it's really powerful. I mean, this is really scholarly research, and that's what I love about it, because I'm like, oh my God, if I said that to a student, like, let me give you some scholarly research, they'd run away as fast as they could. This is golden.
Well, that's like the little Trenton mini-zines. It's just enough information, because if history can be really dry and boring. So this is just enough to get you interested.
You can go find more if you want.
Yeah.
I'm curious about pork roll. I'm like, so is it Taylor ham or pork roll? I'm not from Jersey, so I'm like, I don't know. I know it's a controversy.
We did a zine about pork roll.
Exactly. That's why I noticed, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'll be reading that one later tonight.
Yep.
Any other questions? We still have time. Yes.
Sure. Hi, so this question is, I guess, for Mike and Laura. It's in your self-publishing history, what's been your approach to kind of, editing at the beginning versus what your awareness of other people reading these very, personal opinions, and, how did that change through your history of self-publishing and your, awareness of that, or devil may care?
I have to say, when I found some of my old ones, and I read them, I'm like, oh man, how embarrassing. And I was like, I don't know if I want this in a collection, because wow, that was really ew, But that's you at a certain point in time, and those were my thoughts, and that's how I was. So it kind of, I share it with the trepidation of, ooh, well, I'm supposed to be a professional adult now. Do I want people knowing of, what I used to do when I was, doing this zine? And so I think that I'm getting off the track of your question, but I think that it's fun to go back when you create your own zine and see where you were in a moment of time, because I never really did a diary or a journal or anything. And for me to actually do it at that point in time and then share it with people is kind of amazing that I did that. And I still have friends, after they read this joking zine that I did. So it's kind of an interesting, timeline to see yourself through.
Yeah, there's definitely a time capsule dimension to going back, as I have for the last couple of weeks, and taking out all my old stuff and reading it again. And I think especially if you start doing this when you're when I was 16, 17 years old is when I started it. It's very obvious that there was a performative dimension to what I was writing. Because I was like if you look at my old zines, you can like pinpoint to like the letter when I had first seen Comet Bus, because I was like, okay, well now it's just going to be like this because this is the coolest thing I've ever read, so I'm just going to emulate this style of writing or this mood or whatever. But I think that's fine. I mean, you can't like anybody who's totally proud of everything they did when they were teenagers. I've always sought to think of myself as somebody with progressive ideals and stuff and so forth. But sometimes I read stuff that I wrote when I was 17, 18, and I'm just like I would not like me today. So yeah, there's definitely a dimension of having to just sort of like treat things as like, okay, well this is where I was and this was the reality then, and mercifully I have moved on from thinking this crappy way or saying this crappy thing, whatever. But yeah, you're just kind of putting it all out there.
But that's also a perspective of history. At that moment in time, that was what the culture was, and that was present day. So we're looking at what we did in a completely different time frame, another concept of it. But that's for all of history when we're looking back. It's the interpretation of history, not necessarily what happened. It's our interpretation of it, of what happened.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, follow-up question. So then, in your work, like, are you seeing that younger folks who have kind of grown up with being kind of, what do they say, like digital native or whatever, like one of those terms like that, like where there's a hesitancy to make a physical document of maybe like their thoughts or their experiences that doesn't feel as ephemeral maybe as it might have felt years ago when you could just print something and be like, well, somebody's going to see this or not, and it might just, line somebody's birdcage, you know what I mean? Like, so do you have a sense that younger folks are feeling liberated by making these things, or is there hesitancy in kind of what they're sharing or what they're making?
I would say in general, once certainly there's a first of all, they come in and they have no idea what a zine is. They're like, a Zine. And then I'm like, magazine? But you can call it a Zine because everybody else does too. But I think that honestly when they come in and they just come in and they think, oh my God, what are we gonna do? But the second I pulled a maker cart out that's just full of scissors and glues and bits, and they're just like, what? They don't touch their phones again. First of all, because their hands are covered in glue. Yeah. They wouldn't want to hurt that. But that's a beautiful way to get people away from your phones. Give them a grubby substance, because they're not going to touch anything then. But honestly, mostly they feel so empowered, because you know what? No one ever asks you, tell me your story. We ask each other things like, where do you work? What's your social status? Tell me about how, and that's just you want to hear, what's your story? What do you care about? That's what I want to know. What do you have for breakfast? When are you going to see your whatever again? Or what's that next thing you're going to do this afternoon? So I think in general, once you let students go nuts, they can't stop. Now, what I do find fascinating, though, is at the end of it, you show them all these cool hands-on objects. It depends on their own language and skills. A lot of students, I'm a baby of the 70s. I grew up making stuff by hand, and I really lean towards that because it's the language I understand. A lot of these students grew up with a cell phone in the womb. You know what I mean? They came out, they know how to use it certainly better than I do. And I think that now it's those are their skill sets. They know digital. So students do make incredible digital zines too. And then I'm like, are you going to print that out? But it adds another conversation. So what's happening here? Is this something we're meant to do digitally? Is this something we're meant to do physically? And then we can have a really interesting discourse about, well, what's the difference between a digital zine and a physical zine? To me, digital is kind of I wonder how I'd fold that. Is there a print button? But it's a wild ride. How do you collect a digital zine? We keep them on a really weird LibGuide and research and keep them, but then it's well, how do you, then you have to index those. Then you need a whole other policy. You need a whole other mechanism. So I think that I let students do whatever they feel comfortable with. In the end, often the digital people are like, I don't have anything to give anyone. And I'm like, oh, buzzkill, right? Because everybody's loading you up with their goods. So I think it makes them question those choices. So yeah, I think it's whatever works. Both empowering. I often love the activity when I have my students, I'll be like, make it by hand and then make it digital, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about what you needed for each skill.
Did you? Yeah. We have time for one last question.
Hi, I'm Beatrice. Thanks for sharing. This question is more for Laura and Megan. If someone maybe wants to start a zine movement at their own library, what advice do you have with getting the librarians like up to date or introducing them to zines, like working up to maybe having an actual zine library or a zine, like what you're doing, or do you have advice on like how to even approach like, hey, this is a great idea.
Yeah, I had to do a lot of convincing because nobody really knew and what zines were. And the one person who did know went on to another job. So I just was really annoying and just kept saying zine, zine, zines to everybody. And this is what we're gonna do. And I kind of asked, I phrased it a little differently. But I had to really be proactive. And I had to start doing it so they could see what it was, because they weren't getting what it was and why it was important for the public library. So that's why I phrased it as the archivist, that this was something that we're saving a history, a part of history of Trenton. And sometimes you have to do it on your own and then people will jump on board. I've been trying to get more public libraries interested in creating their own. So I've done a couple panels at the New Jersey Library Association conference, and we started a zine zone there, and librarians are starting to get interested in it because they really didn't know what it was. I mean, it comes with its own problems, where it's going to be located, who's going to watch it. A lot of zines have walked away from our collection, and that's just what's going to happen. So I think you have to start it yourself and then start showing people, but just keep putting the buzz in people's ears, zines.
I think it sells itself. I agree with you.
Yeah.
You just have to show people. I always ask people at the end of a workshop, because we're not to the point at Rutgers of collecting them yet. Like that, I think about that and I think, oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. And then like I come back to reality, and then I'm like, oh my god, that would be a 7,000 email nightmare.
It's a lot of work.
It is. It's an enormous amount of work. So for me, it's a lot more engaging and easier to do a workshop with humans and then to be like, blam! Here's our report. Here's how many people we worked with. Here's what they had to say. Here's what we did. Now where's the grant to start our zine library? So that's kind of the mode that I'm working at, continuing to just get out there in the community, get my grubby little mitts in as many zine events and places to learn as much as possible. But start small. I say that with any creativity work. Start small, make a goal or two, and don't overwhelm yourself. And then move forward and use the reflective of what you learned. Take that to the next step. Take the good, take the bad, leave the bad, whatever.
It actually is fun, because, the archivist in me does kind of, sometimes it's really boring, sometimes I'll find really cool stuff in the collection, but this was something that took me out of that comfort zone, and it was like almost a refreshing thing to do in the eyes of the zine librarian / archivist. So it's going to be fun, but it's going to be a lot of work. But, talk to me about that.
Well, that concludes our first panel for the Zine Fest today. Let's give a warm round of applause for our awesome lucky to have you all here today, and it was just fascinating and really educational for all of us, I think. So thank you again. And stick around if you want to attend the next zine panel discussion. It's happening in just a few minutes right here.